Hey everybody, welcome to Great Plains Nature Center. My name is Alan Saylor. I'm one of the naturalists here at GPNC, and I am so glad that you're joining us from wherever you're at for our Kansas Day Kansas Symbols program. This Friday marks Kansas's 160th birthday, so that is that's pretty good. It's kind of hard to imagine 160 candles on a cake, but that is where Kansas is at. So today we are celebrating some of the pieces of nature that have become official state symbols of Kansas and represent what makes Kansas unique to the rest of the world. So we are going to jump in on that. And yeah, maybe there's some symbols you know already, some you don't. And maybe we'll all learn a little bit along the way here. So let's get to it with our Kansas state symbols. All right, so happy birthday, Kansas. And there is our first, there's our Kansas flag, which has one of our major state symbols right there at the very top. It is our state flower. You probably all know this because Kansas is the sunflower state. All right, it is the wild native sunflower, and this is a really beautiful plant. As far as flowers go, they're huge, right? They've got all sorts of petals. They get really tall as well. They can some of the species of sunflower can get up to 6 to 8 feet tall. They're just really massive flowers. And yeah, they are the one that's our official state flower. There's a few species, a few varieties, but the wild native sunflower is our official state flower. Of course, also you see there in the middle of those beautiful yellow petals, you've got the seed head of the sunflower, chock full of delicious sunflower seeds, which are a great food source for a lot of animals and a good food source for people too, if you like to snack on those. Now, something that makes sunflowers a little unusual is that we don't usually think of plants as being able to move, right? We see them, grasses and flowers and trees are rooted in place. Yeah, they don't seem to do a lot of movement like an animal would. Maybe they blow around in the breeze some, but they don't really seem to move very much. Sunflowers are different in that regard. They will turn their head to follow the sun. They're what's called a heliotropic plant. So they will actually move their head across the sky to follow the sun. It rises in the east, it sets in the west, and so they follow it as it moves across the sky. And then at nighttime, they will turn back the other way and wait for the sun to rise again. So they are always oriented towards the sun. In order to get as much sunlight as possible on those leaves to help them photosynthesize, to help them make their food. So kind of unusual that they do that. All right, our state bird. Our state bird is one you may know, maybe not. If you don't know, that's okay. It is the western meadowlark. And this is one that is always easy for me to remember because I think of it as being kind of sunflower colored, right? It's yellow. It's got the yellow on its throat and its belly, and it's got that kind of that black necklace on as well, right? So the western meadowlark is our state bird. Big time prairie bird. You can find them on open shortgrass prairies and agricultural fields and things like that, pastures. That is where you're most likely to see them, and they're a bird that also sticks around throughout most of the year in Kansas. They're not a bird that migrates and goes south for the winter, so you can find them here year round, especially in the winter time when there's not a lot of color out there on the prairie. These meadowlarks really pop, so it's a great time to see them as well. They are also very closely related to a cousin of theirs, the eastern meadowlark, which if you had them both right in front of you, they look identical. It's very difficult to tell them apart. In fact, really the only way you can tell them apart is when you hear them sing. So this is our western meadowlark song. Very lovely. And yeah, so if you hear that calling out on the prairie, that is our state bird talking to you. Very nice. Okay. So moving from our state bird to our state tree. Okay, so this is one of my favorites because it's one of the few really, really tall trees that we get here in Kansas. If you may know it, you may not. Give you a second to guess. It is the cottonwood tree. Okay, so cottonwoods, like I said, they are a really, really massive tree. They're one of the few really tall ones that occurs naturally on the prairie. Some of them can get up to 100 feet tall or more. They just are really, really gigantic. And they tend to be a water loving tree, right? They tend to grow really close to water sources, creeks, streams, ponds, things like that. So if you're driving across Kansas and you see a stand of cottonwood trees, you probably know that they're close to water out there. Okay, so I've got with me here a tree cookie from one of these cottonwoods. If they, if one was to fall over and then you were just, slice it up kind of like a loaf of bread, you would end up with something like this. And this is kind of interesting because you get to look inside the tree. You can see how old the tree is. Cottonwoods tend to be relatively fast growing. You can also get a cross section of this bark because they have really, really strong, like plated bark on the outside of them. It's kind of like a plate of armor protecting that tree. They're just really, really, really cool looking, and of course, just a really absolutely gigantic tree, which is kind of something cool to see here in Kansas because we don't have a lot of that. The reason that they're called cottonwoods is because of their seeds. Okay, so you can see there on the right, when they have seeded out, they kind of explode with this cotton-like fluff. And that helps the seeds distribute, right? That helps the seeds to move around, to get from one place to another as they're carried by the wind. Because obviously a cottonwood tree can't pick up its roots and go scatter seeds all over the place. It needs a little help to disperse those seeds. So that cotton fluff, especially when they're fully seeded out, you can see that cottonwood fluff kind of drifting through the air as it gets picked up and carried away by the wind. And then you can also see on their leaves, they've got those triangular leaves on the left there that are a little brighter on the bottom side than the top side. And that's also kind of a cool thing about cottonwoods because it kind of makes them look like they're sparkling when all those leaves are blowing around. They've got a long petiole on each leaf, and as the wind blows through them, they kind of flap around and it makes the tree look like it's shining. So I'm a big fan of cottonwoods. All right, our state mammal. Our state mammal. This is one we probably know, or if you haven't seen it, you're probably aware of it because it is the largest animal in North America. Okay, it is the American bison. This is a great, big, huge animal. You can see they've got the massive head, massive horns, that gigantic hump of muscle on their back. They're just a huge, huge animal. One of my favorites. They weigh up to 2,000 pounds, which is that's kind of hard to imagine how much that is. But it's that's as much as some cars weigh. So they're a really great big animal, and they're fast too. They can actually run 35 miles an hour. So that is faster than any human being can run. So just something to think about. You don't want to make a bison mad. You don't want them coming for you. Now, if we take a look here, to give you an idea of how big this creature is, I actually have a bison skull with me, and this thing is monster huge. You can see they've got that great big head, great big horns as well. So really, really big, powerful animal. And of course, but inside their mouth, they've got all these nice flat teeth that they use as a grazer, right? Their diet consists, pretty much entirely of grasses. So they're closely related to cows and sheep and things like that. So they're kind of like supersized cows in a way. And yeah, just a really, really big animal. Now, they often will fight with one another to kind of establish who's the dominant one, who's in charge in the herd. And this kind of lets you see how powerful these bison are. This is a video of two bull bison fighting one another. And you can kind of see that they are ramming into each other and sort of pushing each other around. Remember, these are animals that both weigh about 2,000 pounds, and they just have no problem shoving each other around. Really, really impressive to see that. You can also see those cars parked alongside the road there are not all that much bigger than the bison themselves. So yes, if you do see a bison out in the wild, there are free roaming herds of bison still in some parts of the country, especially in the Yellowstone Park area and things like that. And even here in Kansas, we have some out on the Konza Prairie. You don't want to get too close to them because they can be a little mean. All right. How about our state insect? What could our state insect be? Any guesses on that? It's a very buzzy insect. If you are thinking along the lines of bees, you are correct. It is the honeybee. So the honeybee is a Kansas state insect, despite the fact that it is technically not native to Kansas. It was actually introduced here by people. But it's still a pretty important thing for the state because they do a great job of pollinating. Honeybees pollinate a lot of agricultural plants, not just flowers, and that helps a lot of our food to grow, right? It's estimated that around a third of the food that we eat on our plate at every meal can be tied directly to honeybees helping plants to reproduce by pollination. So it's really important to have these bees around. Also, if you're a fan of honey, it's nice to have them around too. I am personally a big fan of peanut butter and honey sandwiches. I love I love honey as a sweetener, as a snack. So you can thank a hardworking bee for that too. So they are a state insect. Ooh, a state amphibian. Okay. All right. So remember, the amphibians are these are the things that are cold-blooded, okay, but they're not covered in scales like reptiles and lizards and turtles. Okay, they have more of a smooth, moist skin. And they tend to live near water, right? They tend to live the first part of their life in water and then emerge from the water when they're adults, just like how a tadpole becomes a frog. Okay, so those are examples of amphibians. You might have guessed that our state amphibian is the barred tiger salamander. Okay, so this is kind of an unusual creature, right? It looks a little bit like a blend between a fish and a lizard and a frog, right? It's got smooth, kind of wet-looking skin. It's got a big, long tail, but it's got short little limbs. He's got a great big head and a big mouth, but tiny little eyeballs. And yeah, he looks a little neat. They are typically kind of difficult for most people to find because they tend to be active when we're asleep. Okay, they are a nocturnal animal. They spend a lot of the day burrowed down, in the soil, keeping themselves, in a moist environment, and then emerging when it's time to hunt. So typically, you have to be up kind of late to find salamanders easily. They tend to be pretty good at hiding. But that's our state amphibian. So enjoy hunting for one. See if you can find one out there. All right, this is one of my favorite things to talk about is our state fossils. And Kansas actually has two of them. We've got a state flying fossil and then a state marine fossil as well. So two different kinds of huge reptiles that are unfortunately both extinct now. They're not a part of the Kansas landscape anymore. But maybe that's a good thing because these were both kind of fearsome. We've got on the right, you've got the pteranodon, which was our state flying reptile, massive pterosaur, huge wingspan of over 20 feet, and then just that gigantic beak as well. Tremendously huge animal. And then on the left, you've got the Tylosaurus, a kind of mosasaur or marine reptile. So these would have been swimming around Kansas during the late Cretaceous, during the age of the dinosaurs. So two different animals that you would have found in Kansas anywhere from, about 90 million years ago. This is what they would have looked like when they weren't just bones. And you're probably thinking, it's kind of odd that you would find a massive ocean-dwelling creature as a fossil in Kansas, right? Yeah, that is kind of odd. The reason for that is because 90 million years ago, Kansas was underneath an ocean. All right, we were part of the Western Interior Seaway, which was an ocean that was about 600 feet deep over Kansas. So think about, next time you're driving near downtown Wichita, those buildings, the tallest buildings we have in Wichita, are just about 300 feet tall. So you'd have to stack one of those on top of each other, and that's how high above you the water would have been. Okay, 600 feet of water. So that ocean's obviously all dried up now. So the things like, the Tylosaurs and all that are gone. But you can still find lots of ocean fossils in Kansas. Even on the sides of roads, you can find fossilized clamshells and ammonites and things like that all over the place. So it's very cool. Kansas has a lot of great places to go on a fossil hunt. All right. Our state fish. If you're an angler, if you like fishing, you are definitely familiar with this fish. It's very well known, very common fish here in Kansas. It is the channel catfish. And so these are obviously named for those big long whiskers that they have. And what's interesting about those is that they are covered in taste buds. So for us, all of our taste buds are inside the mouth. For a catfish, their taste buds are all over their whiskers, and they have taste receptors all over their body as well. So some people refer to them as like a swimming tongue, because when they are swimming through the water, they are tasting everything around them to try and find food on the bottoms of lakes and ponds and things like that. So channel catfish are very interesting. Also, if you're going, when you're going fishing this summer and you happen to catch some, you want to be careful because they actually do have some pretty good defense mechanisms. They've got a couple really nasty spines on both their fins and their dorsal fin as well. It can be kind of rough if you're not handling these the right way. You don't want to get jabbed with one of those. They can, once they poke you, it can be pretty painful. It can sting quite a bit. So you want to make sure if you've got a catfish on the hook, you handle it the right way. Definitely be careful. Don't stick yourself. All right. Now, our last Kansas symbol that we're going to talk about today is actually one that I have here with me. It is our state reptile. And this one is pretty well known. It's really common in Kansas too. So you may know it already. It is the ornate box turtle. Okay, these turtles are they're like I said, they're all over the place in Kansas. I feel like anytime if you're driving down some dirt roads here in Kansas, you will see these crossing all the time when it's warm out. They're pretty easy to find. They also are interesting in that they're one of the few turtles in Kansas that actually live on land. Most of our turtles are aquatic, so they spend most of their time in the water. Box turtles aren't really built for that, though. They're not a swimmer. They are really built for crawling and digging. So they are definitely not one that you would want to put in a pond or anything like that, because they might have trouble getting out. They are definitely a land-based, a terrestrial turtle. Now, something that's kind of interesting about them also is it's very easy to tell the boys from the girls because they get a really distinctive eye color. So the male is the one there on the left. It's got a bright red eye. The female is the one on the right. They tend to have a little bit more muted color, a little bit more of a like a brownish yellow color to their eye. So yeah, it's not super brightly colored on them. You can always easily tell which ones are males and females. Now, you can also see here where they get the name ornate. You can see all those interesting patterns and designs and little flecks of color in the scales on these turtles. Think of the word ornate as being kind of similar to an ornament, right? Like you might put on a Christmas tree. All those patterns and everything are like decorations. And that's where it gets the name ornate, this turtle. They also help it really blend in well. If you think about this turtle living in grasslands, right, down near the soil where there's lots of dead grass and things like that, that yellow color really just kind of helps them blend in. It's good camouflage to keep them protected. So I will get out our own little box turtle here. All right. This little one does not have a name or anything. It's about I want to say 4 to 5 years old. I don't remember exactly when this turtle's birthday is, but it's still growing, right? It's still kind of in kind of like it's been going through a little bit of a growth spurt lately, so it's kind of like a teenager, more so than a baby. But it's not quite mature yet. It's still got a few years to go before it is fully grown. You can see, once they're full size, they're not much bigger than this. This is what their shells look like when they're fully grown. So, they'll get a little bit bigger, but they're not too large. They're not a huge turtle by any means. I'll hold this one a little closer so we can see. It's kind of difficult to see on the camera, that eye color. This one is actually a male. So that red eye is really starting to come in now. And it's kind of difficult to see from there, but it's starting to get, the eye is starting to get a little more red tint to it. So that'll get brighter and brighter as it gets more mature. Now, we talked about why they're called ornate turtles. We didn't talk about why they're called box turtles yet. And you can kind of see when it sees my finger there, it ducks its head into its shell a little bit. These are one of the few turtles that is really capable of pulling in all their arms and legs and their head inside their shell. Okay, so many turtles can't do that at all. And when they do, let's take a look at on the underside of the turtle, on their plastron, they've got that line right there. Okay, that line is like a little hinge. So a box turtle is actually able to close their shell at that hinge like a little door. They're able to shut, kind of shut themselves up like a lid on a box. That's where the box part of their name comes from. It's a really good defense for them. We've had turtles that have come to the Great Plains Nature Center after they, have a bad run-in with like a dog or something, right? Because sometimes a dog might see a turtle in its shell and think it looks kind of like a chew toy, and so they might, play around with it a little bit. But those turtles are able to defend themselves from getting messed with by larger predators because they're able to shut themselves up in like a little box. So pretty good protection for them. All right, you can also see those big claws that they have. They don't have flippers. They've got big claws for digging. They're looking for all sorts of stuff, for insects and worms and grubs and things like that are a big part of their diet. When they're young, they're big meat eaters. They kind of become more herbivores as they get older, but they can definitely eat a wide variety of foods. Can kind of make them difficult to keep as pets because they do need so many different kinds of foods to have the right nutrition. They also live for a really long time. If you're thinking about getting a box turtle for a pet, it's going to be with you for quite a while. They can live for decades. So you might have it. You get a box turtle now this size, it'll still be your pet. When you're a grown up and on your own and everything like that. So. All right. Now, one last question I always like to ask when we have turtles is, can the turtle ever come out of its shell? And what do we think? Can a turtle ever come out of their shell? Let's take a look at the inside of a turtle shell. Maybe that'll give us our answer. So this is the outside. This is what the inside looks like. Okay, so you see these right here are the vertebrae of the turtle. If you feel your backbone, it's made up of tiny little bones that are all stacked on top of each other. Those are called vertebrae. And for a turtle, their backbone is part of their shell. Okay, so it doesn't ever actually, it can't leave the shell. It's made of bone, and it grows with the turtle as it gets older. Sometimes we see it like movies and cartoons, the turtle will take its shell off. They're not able to do that, though. They wouldn't be able to take their shell off anymore than we would be able to, take a bone out of our body, right? It's just part of us, and it's part of them as they grow older. All right, so that is our state reptile. But you see how they move around, especially because when they want to get to exploring, they can move pretty quickly if they're motivated. Sometimes they're not. They don't necessarily move too slowly. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining us on our Kansas Day Kansas Symbols presentation. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the animals that make Kansas special. And yeah, hopefully you will come visit us at the Great Plains Nature Center. We're open every day except Sunday from 9 to 4. And yeah, we hope to see you around. Thanks for listening.